The year was 1963, and the streets of Harlem were humming with a tension that felt different than the usual summer heat. It was a friction in the air, a static charge that made the hair on the back of your neck stand up, even when the sun was shining. For Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson, the undisputed godfather of Harlem, that friction usually meant one thing: war. But this time, the war wasn't coming from the Italians downtown, and it wasn't coming from the police precincts that lined the edges of his territory. It was coming from a ghost. For 3 weeks, Bumpy had been chasing a shadow. His name was Danny DeMarco, but the streets had already christened him with a nickname that fit his style a little too well. They called him the Dagger. He was a kid from Brooklyn, barely 25 years old, with eyes that looked like dead shark eyes and a smile that didn't have a shred of warmth in it. He didn't care about the hierarchy. He didn't care about the treaty Bumpy had spent 10 years negotiating with the Genovese family. Danny DeMarco was an arsonist who just wanted to watch the world burn, and for reasons Bumpy couldn't quite figure out, he had decided to start the fire in Bumpy Johnson's backyard. It started small. A numbers runner on 125th Street got jumped. That was standard operating procedure in the underworld. It happened. Bumpy sent a couple of his enforcers to ask around, expecting to find a desperate junkie or a rival crew trying to flex a little muscle. But the enforcers came back empty-handed. No one had seen anything. Then, 2 days later, one of Bumpy's collection houses was hit. They didn't just take the cash. They pistol-whipped the old man running the books, a man who had been with Bumpy since the 1940s. They left a message scrawled on the wall in black shoe polish. It just said, "Your turn." Bumpy was sitting in the back office of the Blue Velvet Lounge, staring at the report on his desk. The smoke from his cigar curled up toward the tin ceiling tiles, forming lazy gray loops in the yellow light of the desk lamp. The club outside was thumping with the sound of a saxophone, the low murmur of conversation, and the clinking of glasses. But back here, it was silent as a tomb. Bumpy ran a hand over his face, feeling the exhaustion deep in his bones. It wasn't the violence that tired him. He was a man who had lived by the gun his entire life. It was the chaos. He had built Harlem into a kingdom of order. He made sure the rent got paid. He made sure the streets were safe for the working people. And he made sure that if crime happened, it happened according to the rules. DeMarco was breaking the rules. The door to the office opened, and Bumpy didn't look up. He knew the footsteps. It was his right-hand man, a towering figure named Whispers, who got the name because his voice sounded like gravel grinding in a cement mixer. "Boss," Whispers said, closing the door softly behind him, "we got a problem at the warehouse on the west side." Bumpy looked up then, his eyes narrowing. "What kind of problem?" "Someone hit the shipment coming in from Jersey," Whispers said, looking uncomfortable. "They didn't take the product, Bumpy. They set fire to the truck. Driver got out, but the whole load is ash." Bumpy didn't explode. He didn't slam his fist on the table. That was what a small man would do. Instead, he went very still. It was a stillness that was more terrifying than any shouting match. He placed his cigar carefully in the crystal ashtray and folded his hands on the desk. "Did they see who did it?" "Driver said it was 3 guys," Whispers said, "led by a kid in a long coat. Said the kid was laughing while he threw the match." "DeMarco," Bumpy whispered. The name tasted like poison in his mouth. "He is mocking us, boss," Whispers said, his voice dropping lower. "People are starting to talk. They are saying Bumpy Johnson can't control his own streets. They are saying this kid from Brooklyn is running circles around the king." Bumpy stood up, buttoning his suit jacket. The fabric was expensive Italian silk, tailor-made to hide the .45 caliber pistol tucked against his ribs. "Let them talk," Bumpy said coldly. "Talk is cheap. When I find this kid, no one is going to be talking about him ever again. They won't even mention his name, because they will be too afraid of what happened to him." He walked out of the office, moving through the crowded club like a shark parting a school of fish. People stepped aside, nodding with respect, offering hushed greetings, but Bumpy saw the looks in their eyes. Whispers was right. He saw the doubt. He saw the question marks. Harlem looked to him for protection, and right now he looked like a man who couldn't stop a wild dog from tearing up the yard. He needed to go home. He needed the one place where he wasn't a legend, or a target, or a king. He needed Lenox Terrace. He needed Mamie. The penthouse apartment was quiet when he arrived. It was past midnight, and the city lights were twinkling through the large windows that looked out over the skyline. Bumpy locked the heavy oak door behind him, engaging the 3 deadbolts that he had installed himself. He hung his hat on the rack and walked into the living room, loosening his tie. Mamie was sitting in her favorite armchair by the window, a book open on her lap, but she wasn't reading. She was looking out at the city, her silhouette framed by the glow of the streetlights below. She was wearing a silk robe the color of emeralds, her hair wrapped perfectly in a silk scarf. To Bumpy, she was the most beautiful thing in a world that was often ugly. "You are late," she said, her voice soft but carrying that undeniable edge of authority that only she possessed. She didn't turn around. "Business," Bumpy said, walking over to the sideboard to pour himself a glass of brandy. The liquid amber swirled in the glass, catching the light. "Business involving a burnt truck on the west side?" Mamie asked. Bumpy paused, the glass halfway to his mouth. He shouldn't have been surprised. Mamie Hatcher Johnson wasn't just a housewife. She was the queen of Harlem. She had ears on every corner, and people told her things they wouldn't dare tell him. She knew the pulse of the street just as well as he did, maybe even better. He took a sip of the brandy, feeling the burn in his chest. "Bad news travels fast," he said. "Too fast," Mamie said, finally turning to look at him. Her eyes were sharp, intelligent, and currently filled with worry. "This boy, this DeMarco, he is getting bold, Bumpy. Setting fire to a truck is one thing, but the way he is moving, he is not acting like a thief. He is acting like a hunter." Bumpy walked over and sat on the ottoman in front of her chair, taking her hand. His hand was large, scarred from years of fighting, rough like sandpaper. Her hand was soft, manicured, elegant. The contrast was the story of their marriage. "He is a punk," Bumpy said dismissively, trying to reassure her. "He is a reckless kid looking to make a name for himself by taking a shot at the title holder. I have dealt with 100 punks like him, Mamie. Dutch Schultz was 100 times the man this kid is, and I put him in the ground. This DeMarco is a mosquito. I am going to swat him." "Mosquitoes carry disease," Mamie said, her grip on his hand tightening, "and they are hard to see until they bite you. I don't like this, Bumpy. I have a feeling. You know my feelings." He did know. Mamie's intuition was legendary. She had saved his life more than once by telling him not to go to a meeting or to take a different route home. If Mamie said something felt wrong, Bumpy listened. "What does your feeling say?" he asked gently. "It says he isn't after the money," she whispered. It says he wants you, personally. He wants to be the man who took down Bumpy Johnson. And men like that, men who don't care about money, they are the most dangerous kind because you can't buy them off and you can't reason with them. Bumpy kissed her knuckles. I am not going to let anything happen to this house, Mamie. I promise you. I have Whispers and the boys turning over every rock in Harlem. We will find him, and when we do, it will be over. He stood up, trying to project the confidence of the king, but deep down, the doubt was gnawing at him too. He finished his brandy and went to the bedroom to change, leaving Mamie alone in the living room. She watched him go, her eyes filled with a love that was fierce and protective. She knew Bumpy better than he knew himself. She saw the tension in his shoulders. She saw the way his hand hovered near his waist where he kept his gun. He was worried. And if Bumpy Johnson was worried, then the danger was real. The next morning, the danger arrived at their front door. It wasn't a bomb. It wasn't a team of hitmen kicking down the door. It was a single red rose left on the doormat of their penthouse apartment. Mamie found it when she opened the door to get the morning paper. She stared at it, her heart skipping a beat. A red rose. It was beautiful, innocent even, but in their world, symbols meant everything. She picked it up, careful of the thorns. There was a small card attached to the stem with a ribbon. She opened the card. The handwriting was jagged, frantic. For the widow Johnson. Mamie felt a cold chill run down her spine that had nothing to do with the morning air. The widow. It was a threat so direct, so personal, that it took her breath away. This wasn't business. This was a promise of death. She didn't scream. She didn't drop the flower. She walked back into the apartment, closed the door, and locked it. She walked into the kitchen where Bumpy was drinking his coffee and reading the sports section. She placed the rose and the card on the table, right on top of the picture of the Yankees game. Bumpy looked at the flower, then at the card. He picked it up, reading the words. His face went stone hard. The veins in his neck bulged as his jaw clenched so tight she thought his teeth might crack. Where did this come from? He asked, his voice low and terrifying. On the mat, Mamie said, her voice steady. Just now. Bumpy stood up so fast his chair fell backward with a crash. He grabbed the phone from the wall and dialed a number. Whispers, get the car, now, and bring everyone. I want 4 men on the door of the building. I want 2 men in the lobby. I want a man on the roof. No one comes in or out of this building unless I say so. He slammed the phone down and turned to Mamie. Pack a bag. I am not going anywhere, Mamie said, crossing her arms. Mamie, this is not a discussion. He was here. He was right outside our door. He walked past the doorman, he came up the elevator, and he left this. He could have left a bomb. He could have waited for you to open the door. You are going to your sister's in Jersey until I handle this. I am not running, Bumpy. Mamie's voice rose, matching his intensity. This is my home. You are my husband. If I run to Jersey, he wins. He sees that he scared us. He sees that he made the great Bumpy Johnson send his wife away for safety. I will not give him that satisfaction. Bumpy grabbed her by the shoulders, his eyes wild with fear. This isn't about pride, Mamie. This is about your life. He called you a widow. Do you understand what that means? He is planning to kill me, and he is taunting you with it. I can't fight him if I am worried about you every second of the day. Then don't worry about me, Mamie said, softening her tone. She reached up and touched his face. Bumpy, look at me. I am safe here. You will put men on the door. You will lock the place down. But I am staying. I am the queen of this castle, and I don't abandon my post. Bumpy looked at her, searching her eyes. He saw the steel in them. He knew that look. He could argue with her until the sun went down, but she wouldn't budge. She was as stubborn as she was beautiful. Fine, he growled, but you don't leave this apartment. You don't open the door for anyone, not even the mailman. I am going to find this punk, and I am going to tear him apart with my bare hands. He grabbed his coat and his hat, checking his pistol one last time. He kissed her on the forehead, a hard, desperate kiss, and then he was gone, storming out of the apartment like a hurricane. Mamie locked the door behind him. She waited until she heard the elevator ding, signaling he was gone. Then she walked back to the kitchen table. She picked up the card again. For the widow Johnson. She stared at it, her mind racing. Bumpy was reacting exactly how DeMarco wanted him to react. He was angry. He was emotional. He was charging out into the streets with blood in his eyes, making noise, making a scene. That was the trap. DeMarco was young and he was reckless, but he wasn't stupid. He knew he couldn't beat Bumpy in a straight fight. So he was trying to draw Bumpy out, make him sloppy, make him make a mistake. And Bumpy was walking right into it. Mamie knew she couldn't just sit here and knit while her husband walked into an ambush. She needed to do something. She needed to change the game. Bumpy was playing checkers, reacting to the moves on the board. She needed to play chess. She went to the bedroom and opened her jewelry box. Inside, hidden under a false bottom, was a small black book. She flipped through the pages until she found a number. It wasn't a number Bumpy had in his Rolodex. It was her contact. She dialed the number. It rang 3 times before a voice answered. It was smooth, deep, and devoid of any emotion. Silas, Investigations. Silas, Mamie said. It is Mamie. I need to see you. There was a pause. Mrs. Johnson, is everything all right? No, she said. I have a job for you. A job that my husband cannot know about. I am listening. Meet me at the diner on 110th, the back booth. 1 hour. I'll be there. Mamie hung up the phone. She knew what she was doing was dangerous. If Bumpy found out she was meeting Silas, if he found out she was getting involved in street business, he would be furious. He would say she was disrespecting him, undermining his authority. But she didn't care about his ego right now. She cared about his life. She went to her closet and pulled out a nondescript trench coat and a hat that shadowed her face. She waited for the shift change of the guards Bumpy had posted downstairs. She knew the rhythm of his men, better than they knew it themselves. There was a 3-minute window where the lobby guard went for a smoke, and the relief guard was coming down the stairs. She slipped out of the apartment, taking the service elevator down to the basement. She exited through the laundry delivery door, stepping out into the alleyway. She pulled her collar up against the wind and walked quickly toward the avenue, hailing a cab. Silas was already at the diner when she arrived. He was a man who blended into the background. Average height, average build, wearing a gray suit that looked like it had seen better days. But Mamie knew the truth. Silas was former military intelligence. He was a ghost. He could find anyone, anywhere, and he could do it without leaving a footprint. Mamie had paid for a surgery that saved his leg 5 years ago, and since then he had owed her a debt that he took very seriously. She slid into the booth opposite him. He didn't smile. He just nodded. "Mrs. Johnson," he said quietly, "you look like you are running from something." "I am running towards something, Silas," she said. "Do you know a man named Danny DeMarco?" Silas took a sip of his coffee. "The Dagger. Brooklyn kid. Making a lot of noise lately. Burning trucks. Beating up old men." "He left a rose at my door this morning," Mamie said, "with a note calling me a widow." Silas's eyes tightened just a fraction. That was the only sign of surprise he gave. "That is bold." "It is a trap," Mamie said, leaning in. "He is trying to get Bumpy to lose his head. And it is working. Bumpy is out there right now, tearing up the streets, looking for a fight. That is exactly what DeMarco wants. He wants to lure Bumpy into an ambush." "So what do you want me to do?" Silas asked. "Do you want me to find DeMarco so Bumpy can kill him?" "No," Mamie said firmly. "If I give Bumpy a location, he will go in guns blazing. He will walk into a crossfire. I need to end this quietly. I need to cut the head off the snake before it bites." She reached into her purse and pulled out a thick envelope. Inside was $5,000 cash. "I want you to find DeMarco," she said, "but don't touch him. Just find him. Find out where he sleeps. Find out who he trusts. And then, I want you to set a meeting." "A meeting?" Silas looked skeptical. "With who?" "With me," Mamie said. Silas put his cup down. "Mrs. Johnson, with all due respect, that is a suicide mission. DeMarco is a rabid dog. You don't meet a rabid dog. You put it down. If Bumpy tries to put him down, Bumpy dies," Mamie hissed. "I feel it, Silas. This kid has something up his sleeve. Maybe he has the police on his payroll. Maybe he has Italians backing him. I don't know. But I need to draw him out into the open, on my terms, not his." "And what are your terms?" Tell him I am scared. Tell him I want to make a deal. Tell him I am willing to pay him to leave Bumpy alone." Silas looked at her for a long time. "You are offering yourself as bait." "I am offering him the one thing his ego cannot resist," Mamie said. "The chance to have the Queen of Harlem beg for mercy. He is arrogant, Silas. He won't be able to say no. He will think he has won. And when he comes to collect his prize, we will be waiting." "We?" "You and me, Silas. And whoever you can hire that can keep their mouth shut. I don't want Bumpy's men. They talk. I need your people." Silas looked at the envelope of money, then back at Mamie. "If the boss finds out I helped you put yourself in the line of fire, he will kill me. If you don't help me, he is going to die," Mamie said, her voice cracking just slightly. "Please, Silas, I have never asked you for anything. I am asking you for this." Silas sighed, a long, weary sound. He slid the envelope across the table and tucked it into his jacket pocket. "I will find him. But if this goes sideways, Mrs. Johnson, I am getting you out. I don't care about the plan. I care about keeping you breathing." "Deal," Mamie said. She left the diner first, slipping back out into the city. She felt a strange mixture of terror and adrenaline. She had just put a hit out on a man, and she had just conspired behind her husband's back. But as she rode the cab back toward Lennox Terrace, she touched the wedding ring on her finger. She would do anything to keep Bumpy safe. anything. The next 2 days were a blur of tension. Bumpy was hardly home. He was out on the streets, shaking down every informant, breaking into social clubs, turning Harlem upside down. He came home late, smelling of stale smoke and sweat, his eyes rimmed with red. He was frustrated. DeMarco was a ghost. Every time Bumpy got a lead, the kid was gone, leaving only a mocked-up message or a burning trash can. Mamie played her part perfectly. She stayed in the apartment. She cooked dinner. She rubbed Bumpy's shoulders when he came home exhausted. But underneath the domestic routine, she was working. She received a call from Silas on the second day. It was brief. Tonight, midnight, the shipyard on the river, Pier 42. He took the bait. Mamie felt her heart hammer against her ribs. "Okay," she whispered into the receiver. "Be ready." She hung up and turned around to find Bumpy standing in the doorway of the kitchen. He was looking at her, his expression unreadable. "Who was that?" he asked. Mamie froze. For a split second, she thought about telling him everything. But she looked at his face, the exhaustion, the rage that was simmering just below the surface. If she told him she was meeting DeMarco, he would lock her in the closet. He would storm down to Pier 42 with an army, and DeMarco would see them coming a mile away. The trap would fail. Bumpy would walk into whatever ambush DeMarco had planned. Just my sister," Mamie lied. She smoothed her dress, forcing a smile. "She is worried about us. She saw the news about the truck fire." Bumpy stared at her. He didn't blink. He had the instincts of a predator, and right now, his instincts were telling him something was off. Mamie's voice was a little too high. Her hand was trembling slightly as she put the phone back on the hook. "Your sister," Bumpy repeated. "Since when does your sister call this late?" "It's only 9 o'clock, Bumpy," Mamie said, trying to laugh it off. "She is a night owl. You know that." Bumpy walked over to her. He stood close, his presence overwhelming. He smelled of rain and gunpowder. He reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "You know you can tell me anything, right, Mamie? If something is wrong, if someone contacted you." "No one contacted me, Bumpy," she said, looking him in the eye. "I am just worried about you. That is all." Bumpy held her gaze for a second longer, then nodded slowly. "Okay, I have to go back out. Whispers got a tip about a safe house in the Bronx. We are going to hit it tonight." "Please be careful," Mamie said, and this time she wasn't acting. "I always am," Bumpy said. He kissed her and left. But he didn't go to the Bronx. Bumpy Johnson walked out of the building and got into his car, where Whispers was waiting. "Drive around the block," Bumpy said, his voice cold, "and cut the lights." "Boss?" Whispers looked confused. "What about the safe house?" "There is no safe house," Bumpy said. "I made that up to see how she would react. Park down the street. We are watching the building." "Watching the building? Why?" "Because my wife is lying to me," Bumpy said, staring up at the penthouse window. "She is scared," Whispers. "I saw it in her eyes. Someone got to her. Maybe they threatened her sister. Maybe they threatened her. But she is hiding something, and if someone is forcing her to do something, I am going to kill them, slowly." They sat in the dark car, the rain drumming on the roof. An hour passed, then 2. At 11:30, the side door of the apartment building opened. A figure in a trench coat slipped out. It was Mamie. She looked left and right, then hurried down the street toward a waiting sedan that had pulled up to the curb. Bumpy felt his heart shatter. Seeing his wife sneaking out in the middle of the night, getting into a strange car, it hurt more than any bullet. A million terrible thoughts raced through his mind. Was she leaving him? Was she meeting a lover? Or was she being coerced? "Follow that car," Bumpy growled. "Stay back. Don't let them see us." The chase began. The sedan moved through the wet streets of Harlem, heading east toward the river. Bumpy watched the taillights ahead, his grip on the dashboard tightening until his knuckles turned white. "She is heading to the docks," Whispers said. "Boss, nothing good happens at the docks at midnight." "Just drive," Bumpy snapped. The lead car turned down a narrow access road leading to the industrial shipyards. It was a graveyard of rusted metal and shipping containers. Shadows stretched long and menacing under the flickering halogen lights. The sedan stopped near Pier 42. Bumpy signaled Whispers to kill the engine 100 yards back. They watched as Mamie stepped out of the car. She stood alone under a street lamp, the rain soaking her coat. She looked small, fragile against the backdrop of the massive cranes and dark water. Then, another car emerged from the shadows of a warehouse, a sleek black convertible. It pulled up slowly. The door opened. A man stepped out. He was wearing a long leather coat. Even from this distance, Bumpy recognized the swagger. He recognized the silhouette. It was Danny DeMarco. Bumpy felt the air leave his lungs. His wife. His Mamie. She wasn't being forced into the car. She was walking toward him. She was talking to him. "What is she doing?" Whispers whispered, horror in his voice. "Boss, tell me she ain't." Bumpy didn't answer. His mind was reeling. Why was she meeting his enemy? Was she cutting a deal? Was she betraying him to save herself? The thought was so painful he almost couldn't process it. But then he looked closer. He saw the way she stood. She wasn't standing like a victim. She was standing tall. She was standing like a queen. But then he saw the shadows move. Behind the crates surrounding the pier, dark shapes were shifting. Men with rifles. DeMarco hadn't come alone. It was an ambush. Bumpy's paranoia flared into panic. She didn't know. She thought she was meeting him alone, but she had walked right into a trap. Or maybe she was the trap for him. Maybe she knew he would follow. Number. He refused to believe that. He refused to believe Mamie would sell him out. She was in trouble. She was in over her head. She had tried to play the game, and now she was standing in the middle of a kill zone with a psychopath. Bumpy reached under his seat and pulled out a Thompson submachine gun. The cold steel felt grounding in his hands. He checked the drum magazine. "Boss, there's too many of them," Whispers warned, seeing the men in the shadows. "If we start shooting, she is caught in the middle." "I am not going to let her get in that car," Bumpy said, his voice devoid of fear, replaced entirely by a lethal resolve. He watched as DeMarco smiled, gestured toward the open door of his convertible. Mamie hesitated for a second, then stepped forward. That was it. Bumpy kicked the door open. "Let's go," he roared. He stepped out into the rain, the Tommy gun raised. He didn't care about the odds. He didn't care about the trap. He only cared about one thing: getting his wife back. But as he raised the weapon, ready to unleash hell, he saw Mamie stop. She turned her head slightly, looking toward the dark corner of the warehouse roof. She gave an almost imperceptible nod. Bumpy froze. Suddenly, a shot rang out. But it didn't come from Bumpy's gun, and it didn't come from DeMarco's men. It came from the darkness above. One of DeMarco's bodyguards dropped to the ground. Chaos erupted. But it wasn't the chaos Bumpy expected. Mamie didn't scream. She didn't run. She reached into her coat pocket. And Bumpy Johnson, the man who knew everything about the streets, the man who thought he knew everything about his wife, watched in stunned silence as the Queen of Harlem pulled out a silver revolver and pointed it straight at Danny DeMarco's chest. But before he could process what was happening, the world exploded into gunfire. Bumpy screamed her name, sprinting forward into the darkness, not knowing if he was running to save her or if he was just running into the fire she had started. The night was just beginning, and for the first time in his life, Bumpy Johnson had no idea how it was going to end. The gunfire that erupted on Pier 42 was not the chaotic spray of a gang war, but the precise rhythmic thunder of a trap springing shut. Bumpy Johnson had sprinted into the darkness, expecting to die, expecting to throw his body in front of his wife to shield her from the inevitable hail of bullets. But as he raised his Thompson submachine gun, the world tilted on its axis. The muzzle flashes were not coming from DeMarco's men. They were coming from the rooftops, from behind the shipping containers, from the deep shadows where rats and ghosts usually lived. Bumpy dove behind a stack of rusted oil drums, his expensive Italian suit scraping against the wet concrete. Bullets chipped away the rust above his head, sending sparks cascading down like deadly confetti. He racked the slide of his weapon, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He had lost sight of Mamie. The last thing he had seen was her standing in the open, that silver revolver in her hand, pointed at the man who had threatened to make her a widow. "Mamie!" he roared, his voice tearing through the sound of the rain and the gunfire. He didn't hear an answer. The air was thick with the smell of cordite and the metallic tang of blood. He peered around the edge of the drums. The scene was a masterpiece of violence. DeMarco's men, the hired guns who had looked so imposing just moments ago, were scrambling. They were caught in a crossfire they hadn't anticipated. Two of them were already down, sprawling on the wet asphalt. The others were pinned behind DeMarco's black convertible, firing blindly into the dark. Bumpy saw a figure moving to his left. He swung the barrel of the Thompson around, his finger tightening on the trigger. "Don't shoot, boss. It's me." It was whispers. The big man slid into cover beside Bumpy, breathing hard, his own pistol drawn. "What is happening?" Whispers yelled over the noise. "Who is shooting at them?" "I don't know," Bumpy shouted back. "But we need to get to Mamie. She is out there in the open. Cover me!" Bumpy didn't wait for a confirmation. He surged forward, staying low, moving from cover to cover with the grace of a man who had survived 1,000 street fights. He saw the black convertible ahead. The windows were shattered. DeMarco was crouching behind the rear wheel, screaming orders that no one was following. And there, 10 feet away, behind a concrete pillar, was Mamie. She was pressed tight against the stone, her eyes wide, her chest heaving. She still held the revolver with both hands, but she wasn't firing. She was waiting. Bumpy slid across the wet ground, coming to a stop beside her. He grabbed her arm, perhaps a little too roughly, pulling her deeper into the shadow of the pillar. "Are you hit?" he demanded, his eyes scanning her frantically for blood. "I am fine," she gasped, her voice trembling but clear. "I am fine, Bumpy." "What are you doing here?" he yelled, the fear turning into anger now that he knew she was alive. "Who are these people?" You walked right into a trap." "No, Bumpy," she said, gripping his lapel with surprising strength. "I didn't walk into a trap. I set one." Bumpy stared at her, the words not making sense in the chaos. Before he could ask what she meant, a fresh volley of bullets chewed up the concrete inches from his face. He spun around, raising the Thompson over the hood of a nearby forklift. He saw one of DeMarco's gunmen trying to flank them. Bumpy didn't hesitate. He squeezed the trigger, the heavy gun bucking in his hands. The gunman dropped. He looked up toward the warehouse roof where the first shot had come from. A figure stood up, silhouetted against the gray sky. The figure raised a rifle in a salute. Silas. Bumpy recognized the stance. He recognized the efficiency. It was Silas, the private investigator Mamie had helped years ago. The man who was supposed to be retired. The man who owed Mamie a life debt. It hit Bumpy like a physical blow. The secret phone calls, the sneaking out, the lies. She hadn't been cheating. She hadn't been leaving him. She had been building an army behind his back because she knew he was too stubborn to let her help. "We have to end this," Bumpy growled, looking back at the black convertible. "DeMarco is pinned down." "He is mine," Mamie said, her voice hard as iron. Bumpy looked at her. He saw the fire in her eyes, the same fire that had made him fall in love with her 20 years ago. But he also saw the fear beneath it. She wasn't a killer. She was a queen. And queens didn't do the executioner's work unless they had to. "Stay here," Bumpy ordered. He didn't wait for her to argue. He moved. DeMarco was panicking. The young hitman had come here expecting a terrified woman handing over a bag of cash. Instead, he had walked into a buzzsaw. His men were dead or dying. His car was a wreck. And now, the king of Harlem was coming for him. DeMarco fired his pistol blindly over the trunk of the car, the shots going wide. He was screaming something unintelligible, a mixture of curses and prayers. He fumbled with the magazine, trying to reload, his hands slick with rain and sweat. Bumpy moved through the rain like a wraith. He flanked the car, coming up on the driver's side. He saw DeMarco crouching by the rear tire, shaking, trying to jam a fresh clip into his gun. Bumpy didn't shoot him. That would be too easy. That would be too quick. He stepped forward and kicked the gun out of DeMarco's hand. The pistol skittered across the wet pavement, disappearing into the darkness. DeMarco looked up. His face was pale, his eyes wide with terror. He saw Bumpy Johnson standing over him, the barrel of the Thompson pointing straight at his chest. The lightning flashed, illuminating Bumpy's face. It was a mask of cold, biblical fury. "Get up," Bumpy said. The voice was quiet, barely a whisper, but it carried more weight than the thunder. DeMarco scrambled back, crab-walking on his hands and feet until his back hit the side of the car. "Bumpy, listen, it was just business. I didn't mean—" "Get up." DeMarco stood, his legs shaking so bad they could barely hold his weight. He held his hands up in surrender. "Please," he whimpered. "I'm just a soldier. I was just following orders." "You aren't a soldier," Bumpy said, stepping closer. "Soldiers have a code. Soldiers don't threaten women. Soldiers don't leave roses on a man's doorstep and call his wife a widow before the body is even cold. You are a punk, and you made a very big mistake." Bumpy raised the gun. He was going to end it right there. He was going to cut this boy in half and leave him for the rats. "Bumpy!" The voice stopped him. It was Mamie. She had left the safety of the pillar. She was walking toward them through the rain, the revolver still in her hand. Whispers, who had stepped out from the shadows, moved to flank her, his weapon trained on the shivering figure of DeMarco, while Silas kept his aim fixed from the darkness above. Bumpy didn't lower his gun, but he turned his head slightly. "Go back to the car, Mamie. This part isn't for you." She didn't stop. She walked right up to them, her heels clicking on the wet asphalt. She looked at DeMarco. The boy was crying now, tears mixing with the rain on his face. He looked pathetic. He looked nothing like the monster who had terrorized their lives for the last week. Mamie looked at him with a mixture of disgust and pity. She stepped in front of Bumpy, placing herself between her husband and the man who wanted to kill him. Bumpy stiffened. "Mamie, move." She looked at DeMarco. "You sent me a letter," she said, her voice steady. "You called me a widow." "I'm sorry," DeMarco sobbed. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Johnson. I swear." "You wanted to make me a widow," she continued, ignoring his pleas. "You wanted to take my husband away from me. You wanted to burn down my home. And for what? For a name? For a reputation?" She raised the silver revolver. Her hand was shaking, but her eyes were clear. Bumpy watched her. He saw the conflict in her soul. He knew that if she pulled that trigger, it would change her. It would take a piece of her light and extinguish it forever. Killing a man in self-defense was one thing. Executing a man on his knees was something else. That was his burden to carry, not hers. "Mamie," Bumpy said softly, "give me the gun." She didn't move. "I have to do this, Bumpy. He came for me." "He came for us," Bumpy said. He stepped closer, his chest touching her shoulder. He reached out and covered her hand with his own. His hand was large, warm, and steady. He wrapped his fingers around hers, covering the gun. "You proved your point, Mamie. You beat him. You outsmarted him. You trapped him. He knows who the queen is now. But you are not a butcher. I am." He gently pried the gun from her fingers. She resisted for a second, then let go, her shoulders sagging as the adrenaline left her body. Bumpy handed her revolver to Whispers without looking away from DeMarco. "Take her to the car," Bumpy said to Whispers. "No," Mamie said. "I am not leaving you." Bumpy looked at her. "I am not asking you to leave me. I am asking you to go to the car so I can finish our business." He leaned in and kissed her forehead. It was a brief, tender contact in the middle of a slaughterhouse. "Go." Whispers gently took Mamie's arm. "Come on, Mrs. Johnson. Let's go." Mamie looked at DeMarco one last time, then turned and walked away. She didn't look back. Bumpy waited until the car door slammed shut. Then he turned back to DeMarco. The boy was hyperventilating, his eyes darting around for an escape that didn't exist. Silas had made his way down the fire escape of the warehouse and was now walking toward them, lighting a cigarette, his rifle resting casually on his shoulder. "You got lucky, kid," Silas said, smoke drifting from his lips. "She has a soft heart." DeMarco looked at Bumpy. She let me go?" Bumpy stared at him. The silence stretched out, heavy and suffocating. He lowered the Thompson. "She let you go," Bumpy said quietly. "But I didn't." The sound of the single shot echoed across the water, swallowed instantly by the vastness of the river and the night. Bumpy didn't watch the body fall. He turned and walked toward the car where his wife was waiting. The ride back to Lennox Terrace was silent. Whispers drove, his eyes strictly on the road, knowing better than to say a word. In the back seat, Bumpy and Mamie sat on opposite sides. The distance between them felt like a canyon. Bumpy stared out the window at the passing streetlights. His mind was a storm of conflicting emotions. Relief that she was alive, rage that she had put herself in danger, and a strange, grudging respect that he wasn't quite ready to admit. He had spent 20 years building a fortress around this woman. He had kept the violence of his world at arm's length, scrubbing the blood off his hands before he came to the dinner table. He told himself it was to protect her. But tonight, he realized that maybe, just maybe, he had underestimated her. She hadn't just survived in his world. She had commanded it. They arrived at the building. The doorman, looking nervous, held the door open. They rode the elevator up in silence. When they entered the penthouse, the familiar scent of lavender and old books greeted them, a stark contrast to the smell of the docks. Bumpy locked the door. He took off his wet coat and threw it on the chair. Mamie walked into the living room and poured 2 glasses of brandy. Her hands were still trembling slightly. She drank the first one in a single gulp, the liquid courage burning its way down. She poured another and turned to face him. "Say it," she said. Bumpy stood by the fireplace, watching her. "Say what?" "Say what you want to say. Scream at me. Tell me I was stupid. Tell me I disobeyed you. Get it out, Bumpy." Bumpy walked over to her. He didn't scream. He looked tired, older than he had looked that morning. "You could have died, Mamie." "I didn't," she countered. "You lied to me. You made me think you were leaving me. Do you know what that did to me? When I saw you get in that car, I thought I had lost you. I thought you had chosen him over me." Mamie softened. She walked over and placed the glass of brandy in his hand. "I had to, Bumpy. If I told you the truth, would you have let me do it?" "No," Bumpy said instantly. "Exactly. You would have locked me in this room. You would have gone down there with guns blazing, and DeMarco would have seen you coming. He would have had time to prepare. He would have set a bomb. You would be dead right now." "I am the one who is supposed to do the protecting," Bumpy shouted, the anger finally cracking through. "That is my job. I am the king of Harlem. I protect this house. I protect you. If I can't do that, then what am I?" He turned away, slamming his hand against the mantelpiece. The photo frame rattled. Mamie didn't flinch. She walked up behind him and wrapped her arms around his waist, pressing her face against his wet shirt. "You are my husband," she whispered, "and you are a man. You are flesh and blood, Bumpy. You are not invincible. You think you can carry the whole world on your shoulders, but you can't. Not alone." "I don't want you in the life, Mamie," he said, his voice breaking. "It stains people. It ruins them. I do what I do so you can be clean, so you can be the good one." "I am not the good one, Bumpy," she said, tightening her grip. "I am your wife. We are one flesh. Your enemies are my enemies. Your war is my war. You can't shield me from it, because I chose it. I chose you." Bumpy turned around in her arms. He looked down at her face. He saw the exhaustion, but he also saw the resolve. He realized then that the woman standing in front of him wasn't just the beauty he put on a pedestal. She was the steel that held the pedestal up. He sighed, a long, shuddering breath that seemed to let the tension of the last 3 days escape. "Silas?" he asked. Mamie managed a small, tired smile. "He owes me. I paid for his leg surgery 5 years ago." I thought he was retired. He came out of retirement for me." Bumpy shook his head, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. "You had a sniper on the roof. My wife had a sniper on the roof. I learned from the best," she said. Bumpy pulled her close, burying his face in the crook of her neck. He breathed in her scent, letting it wash away the smell of the gunpowder. He held her tight, tighter than he ever had, because he knew how close he had come to losing her. "Don't ever do that again," he whispered into her hair. "I can't promise that," she said honestly. Bumpy pulled back and looked at her. "Then promise me one thing. Next time, tell me. We do it together, or we don't do it at all." Mamie looked at him, surprised. She had expected him to forbid her, to lay down the law. But he wasn't. He was offering a partnership. A true partnership. "Deal," she whispered. Bumpy kissed her. It wasn't a desperate kiss like the one before he left. It was a slow, deep kiss. A seal on a new treaty. He walked over to the window and looked out at the city. The rain was stopping. The clouds were breaking, revealing the glow of the moon over the Harlem skyline. The streets below were quiet. The threat was gone. DeMarco was gone. The message had been sent. But something had changed tonight. The balance of power in the penthouse had shifted. Bumpy Johnson was still the king, yes, but he knew now, with absolute certainty, that the throne was big enough for two. He turned back to the room. Mamie was sitting in her chair, kicking off her shoes, rubbing her feet. She looked normal. She looked domestic. But Bumpy saw the silver revolver sitting on the side table where she had placed it. It glinted in the lamplight. A reminder. He walked over, picked up the gun, and checked the safety. He didn't hide it away in a drawer. He didn't lock it in the safe. He placed it carefully on the mantelpiece, right next to the picture of their wedding day. "What are you doing?" Mamie asked, watching him. Bumpy looked at the gun, then at her. "I'm leaving it there," he said, "just in case anyone forgets who lives here." Mamie smiled. It was a dangerous smile, a smile that belonged to the wife of a gangster. "Come to bed, Bumpy," she said. He turned off the lamp, plunging the room into darkness, save for the city lights outside. He walked toward the bedroom, leaving the gun where it lay. The king and queen of Harlem were safe, and God help anyone who tried to come for them again. The next morning, the sun rose over a different Harlem. The news of what happened at Pier 42 spread through the streets before the newspapers even hit the stands. They didn't know all the details. They didn't know about the trap or the conversation in the rain. But they knew one thing. They knew that Danny the Dagger DeMarco, the Brooklyn arsonist who thought he could burn down Bumpy Johnson's kingdom, had been found floating in the Hudson. And they knew that the last thing he saw wasn't just Bumpy Johnson. The whispers on the street corner changed. The young punks who thought they could make a name for themselves by challenging the old guard thought twice. They looked up at the penthouse windows of Lenox Terrace with a new kind of fear. They used to say that if you crossed Bumpy Johnson, you were a dead man walking. Now, they added a new verse to the legend. They said that if you crossed Mrs. Johnson, you wouldn't even see the bullet coming. And up in the tower, high above the grit and the noise, Bumpy and Mamie Johnson sat at their kitchen table, drinking coffee, reading the paper, and planning the future. Together. The war was over, but the rain was just beginning.